Viewer discretion is advised.
What up, heel faction? Welcome back to Heel Shit. Why do we call it that? Because bad guys do heel shit. I'm Dark Chords, that's Draven Grimes, and Draven, will you introduce this gentleman for us?
I don't know how I can do this one justice. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons I fell in love with professional wrestling, the man himself, Nigel McGuinness, is joining us in the studio. Nigel, welcome.
Thank you very much, Draven. Nice to be here. Nice to see you, fellas. How are you? All right? Enjoying your Sunday there? Whereabouts are you?
Yeah, doing pretty good, Bo. How about you, man? You doing good?
Yeah. Like I said, West Coast out in California, so just getting the day started.
Good deal. So, obviously, we brought you on to do an interview and, probably talk some shit. When it comes to interviews that I like to conduct, I don't necessarily like to go over a lot of the stuff that you've gone over 100,000 times in various other interviews. I want to more or less get to know the man behind the character, so to speak, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So first off, let's go ahead and just get the wrestling shit out the way real quick. How did you get started in this business? How did you fall in love with it? What was like that one defining moment that made you go, I want to be a wrestler?
It was probably 2 or 3 I can think of. I grew up in England, obviously, watching what was called World of Sport, British wrestling on TV over there. And I think it was 1988. They took it off of TV, so it just disappeared from my world. And it wasn't until one of my childhood friends, who I like to call Lying Dave nowadays. He took some heel shit himself back in the day, but he got himself a VHS cassette copy of SummerSlam 90. And when I just saw that, I was mesmerized by the color and just the excitement and the grandeur of it. I'd never seen anything like it, obviously. And it just, from that moment, it kind of hooked me. And but it wasn't until my parents got satellite TV and I could watch American wrestling on TV that I really sort of became a true fan and got into it. And then when they came over and they did SummerSlam 92, it would have been 2 years later, I went to Wembley Stadium and I was sat there 50 rows back and I just had this epiphany. I remember my buddy who was with me, I remember just telling him I'm going to be a wrestler. I just had this unerring belief that that's what I was going to do with my life. And then Robbie Brookside also made a documentary about British wrestling, and watching that made me think, you don't have to be a massive jacked up bodybuilder to do this. You can be a normal, intelligent, regular guy. And so those, I think, were the 3 things that stand out in my mind. And then also Roddy Piper, one time on Superstars, he did this promo that was sort of akin to Martin Luther King's Dare to Dream speech, where he was talking about, if you're sitting out there and watching this and you have a dream, never give up and all that sort of stuff. And that, in an odd way, much like in a movie, I kind of felt like he was talking to me. That really spoke to me at that point. So those were the 4 things. I'm going to have to keep going, aren't I? There's one final thing that kind of pushed me in the direction to actually do that, and that was when I was 17. I got meningitis, and I went into a coma. And had it not been for my girlfriend staying the night that night rather than going home as she'd originally planned, I would have died at home. And so it was her being there that could call in the ambulance and get me to the hospital. And 2 or 3 days later, when I came out of the coma, I just realized, life's short. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. All those sort of cliches. You've got to go and pursue your dream. And so it took me a while to figure out how to do it. But from that point forward, I don't think I was ever going to be doing anything else in my life. Yeah.
Very nice. And you said something about being at Wembley Stadium 92. Was it kind of like a full circle moment when you were at Wembley Stadium at All In? What was it last year that you came back out and you did the Battle Royal?
Yeah, incredible. The Casino Gauntlet match. It was it's one of those moments I've said to people, it was so surreal. And you just couldn't believe it. It's like a Hollywood movie. You wouldn't, you know what I mean? After all those years of not wrestling as well, having given up on the dream of ever possibly doing anything like that, to then walk out there on that stage, get that kind of reaction, it was just incredible. There's an odd thing with it as well. You lose that sense of grandeur after the fact. Becomes, I don't want to say normal, but it's not the life-changing moment that you think it will be.
Right.
It's just something you're very appreciative of. It was an amazing moment. And I'll always be grateful for Tony Khan for giving me the opportunity to do it. But it doesn't solve any lives problems, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like you see in a
right.
movie, at the end of the movie, your hero gets to do what he wants to do, and then off he goes into the sunset and lives happily ever after. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, you know? Yeah.
Right. Right. Now, full transparency, truth be known, I didn't know who you were until you debuted in TNA. And once I started watching your work and watch your ring psychology and stuff like that, that's when I started like digging into who Desmond Wolfe was at that time. And I found Nigel McGuinness and I started watching your old ROH stuff. Your psychology and how you sell is on par with some of the best I've ever studied, looked over, anything like that.
Thank you.
And at the same time, it's very unique. Like you sell it like you should sell it like it is an actual fight. How did you really kind of fine tune that to make it your own style to where I've really never seen anyone else really sell a particular spot or a move like that, or how you piece the matches together?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated, nuanced conversation. Certainly, I was obviously inspired by the British style heavily. Going back to England, one of the best pieces of advice I ever had, and someone for whom I'll always be grateful, William Regal. We had the Brian Pillman Memorial Show. I think it was 2000, maybe 2001. And he was good enough to watch my match that night. And I'd started out training in America, and I'd learned through Les Thatcher, the traditional American Southeast tag team style, great tag team psychology. It was all about telling a story, but it wasn't the nuance of the British style. If you go back and watch some of that British style, they have a very different psychology. They don't work on one body part and move forward with it, but there's nuance to it. And so anyway, long story short, he watched my match and said, if you're going to be a British wrestler, you've got to learn to work a British style. And so you need to go back to England. And that was the best advice I ever got. He was good enough to give me an in with Brian Dixon and All-Star Wrestling over there, to where I could go over and wrestle 5-6 times a week against guys who were far more experienced than me. And when going over there, I just got so much experience. I got to wrestle. Joe Legend is a name that sticks out as a guy that did a lot of how would I say this, more that sort of early 2000s style, that maybe not ECW, but guys like RVD and Jerry Lynn, that sort of style of long drawn out matches. He worked that style. And when I started learning in America, it's far more simple. As I said, it was, a lot of times working a headlock or working an arm, etc., etc. It wasn't having to try to remember a whole different series of moves, etc., etc., which is a skill set in and of itself. So I learned that with Joe, and Joe was fantastic about not just that, but being able to move things on the fly as the match continued. But then Chick Cullen, who was an old World of Sport wrestler, he started out with World of Sport in the early 80s, I believe, and he was just incredible. Just his ability to your point, Draven, looking realistic and everything really meaning something, and the way he moved, the same way that guys like Rollerball Rocco did when they were, and Marty Jones, that sort of mid heavyweight style, as it were, or junior heavyweight style, as it's known in New Japan. So he was a big influence. He was good enough to get me in the ring on his days off, and sort of show me a lot of that British style. And then Robbie Brookside, the guy who I'd watched his documentary, who's now one of the trainers at the PC in Orlando with WWE. Having seen that documentary, and then he was wrestling for Brian at the time, got to wrestle him a couple of times, but more importantly than that, he gave me his VHS cassette collection of all the old World of Sport matches. And this was before YouTube. And I think I say to people sometimes, the reason why guys now are so good is because they can watch any match they want on their phone immediately. Before YouTube, you wanted to watch a match, you had to get a VHS cassette, and so a lot of those things didn't really exist for most people.
Right.
And that being the case, when he gave me his collection, I got to see all these guys, Johnny Sane, and a lot of that sort of style, and all the Fit Finlay stuff, which is just absolutely incredible. He was a huge inspiration to me. So that, I think, was what helped me develop that sort of style, and add nuance, and tell different stories, and try to convey the believability of it, again, to your point. But yeah.
Very nice. So your career is, I'm just going to say, it's amazing. Going back and watching your old Ring of Honor stuff, even if you can go and find some of your rookie stuff, so to speak, that got recorded, all the way up to present day when you did the stuff with Bryan Danielson last year. You've paved this legacy that so many of us professional wrestlers that aspire to have. What do you hope people ultimately remember, not only about Nigel McGuinness, the professional wrestler, but Nigel McGuinness, the person, the commentator, the human being?
I think probably a lot of the stuff that I dealt with in my documentary, The Last of McGuinness, sort of telling that story of not having achieved my dream and not getting to what I wanted in professional wrestling. I think a lot more people can identify with that, because that's the story that most people have in their lives. Unfortunately, there are very few Bryan Danielsons that get to achieve way more than they ever even imagined they would have done. And so that, to me, is the story I'd like to tell, is for everyone to have their dream. I was watching Jimmy Carr. He's a English comedian. He's fantastic. And he was talking about it, the cliche of it not being the destination, it's the journey. It's not the destination or the journey. It's the enjoyment, both. It's not about having what you want. It's about getting it. It's all those sort of experiences, and it's that ability to just enjoy every step of the moment.
One second.
You back?
Yeah.
It happens at least once. It never fails.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so to me, that's what I think I'd like to try to do, is just to sort of inspire people to pursue their dreams, whatever they may be, and to accept that may not work out. We have this notion, our generation, don't we? I think, because we grew up with all those movies in the 80s and the 90s, that if you have a dream and you never give up, you can make it.
Right.
And it's just not true. That's the reality of it, for various reasons, right? Life gets in the way sometimes. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. If you look at Jay Briscoe, he never got to wrestle on the stage that he was capable of for various reasons. And through no fault of his own, that's what happened. But so you just have to appreciate every moment. And I think he did, to that point. I do a magic show now, and he's a big inspiration and a big part of that magic show. And in it, I talk about that, how he really lived in the moment and appreciated everything. And that was why he was, generally speaking, so loved by everybody that knew him backstage, because he was someone that just enjoyed every stage of it. Whether he was wrestling at the Hammerstein Ballroom and, in a super hot Ring of Honor crowd, or doing a small little show wherever it was, he just loved it. He just lived it. And that's what we all need to try to find.
I know I've been doing professional wrestling 15 years now, 16. So I understand that, and I understand where you're coming from. It's about enjoying the journey more or less than the journey itself or the destination. To the point, I'm winding down. My body's starting to break down, stuff like that. So I've kind of transitioned myself as well as
Hmm.
my partner over here. We kind of transitioned to more of, well, talking about it, podcasting, whatever it is. If any show calls us and needs us to do commentary or stuff like that, we'll do it. So I definitely understand that. Um, the point I'm trying to get to is you transitioned from being an active competitor to commentary. How how difficult was that in your mind to go from doing it to now having to talk about it?
Yeah, it wasn't a smooth transition. I was very fortuitous in the sense of so I got hepatitis. Took me a year to get rid of it,
Hmm.
and when I finally got rid of it, TNA let me go. Ring of Honor was a style that, for the money at the time, I couldn't carry on doing.
Correct.
WWE weren't interested because of an old bicep injury, even though it was perfectly okay, clearly. And so I was kind of stuck and I didn't really know what to do. I was ready to walk away as part of the documentary as well. And were it not for Delirious, who had just started running Ring of Honor, who gave me the opportunity to come in and be a commentator with no experience whatsoever, I never would have gone in that direction. And I can think back. You asked me about what inspired me to become a wrestler, but I can think back to a number of people throughout my journey without whom I wouldn't have had close to the success that I did. Gabe Sapolsky is another person. Um, uh, Mike from South Bend, Indiana, the first guy that ever paid me $100 to wrestle. There were all these guys,
You don't
Shasta
forget that.
McNasty from Ohio, that told me that he really believed I was going to make it, and he would book me to do a show just so I could make jokes about Americans, that because he enjoyed that. But yeah, so to your point, I think. So where was I exactly? I was talking about what? Sorry, mine got off track there.
The level of difficulty it
The
was to go
transition to
from,
being
yeah,
a
the
commentator.
transition.
So it was Delirious giving me the opportunity to be the commentator that started me off. And I, like most people, when you're a wrestler, you don't really understand or appreciate what commentary is, you know. And so I was very, very lucky to be starting with Kevin Kelly, who'd worked with WWE before, and he could run the ship. And then we had Jim Cornette, one of the greatest to ever, do professional wrestling,
100%.
speak on a microphone, who was in the back as well, who was helping me as well, feeding me lines, etc., etc. So that was a great start. But at the beginning, I didn't know anything about how to modulate your voice. I didn't know what I was really supposed to say or not say, as the case may be. And so, thankfully, it was really Joe Rogan doing UFC that was the biggest inspiration for me to going, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. I need to be that in professional wrestling. And once I realized that, then I could sort of finally start to contribute something. But it wasn't until I'd been hired by WWE and Michael Cole took me under his wing that I really, if I know this about professional wrestling commentary, this came from Michael Cole and working at WWE. It's you can't appreciate how complicated, how nuanced, how difficult it is to do that job, especially with a live TV product. Especially there, where there are so many other things that make it difficult. So that was really when I finally sort of found my voice once I started working there. I think that was really certainly the biggest influence in terms of me becoming who I am today as a commentator.
Now, is there a learning curve or a vast difference when you go from company to company in your commentary, like with calling the WWE style versus the AEW or indie style? Like, is that a big difference?
Yeah, there's a big transition to WWE, certainly because more people are watching. There's more pressure. But I think much like when I wrestled at Wembley, much like when I first wrestled Kurt Angle, it gave me the confidence to do it because someone had booked me to do that job. You know what I mean? And so once I started there, because I was lucky enough to start doing the UK tournament, which was its own standalone sort of thing. And again, doing it alongside Michael Cole, who's, I think, perhaps inarguably, the greatest play-by-play guy, certainly of that style,
Yes.
that generation, to do it. And he, set me up for success as opposed to set me up for failure, which a lot of people in his position could have done, and in the past have done, probably to him as well, by his own admission. So that was huge. But the style, it's live TV, and they have what's called traffic. So if you're doing an indie show, number one, it's probably not live. But even if it is live, you can have a little bit of fun. You're not having to pitch to backstage promos or packages. You're not having to read sponsorships, etc., etc. You're not having to lay out at the certain point or transition or segue from this to this, and all these little things that are so seamless that you don't realize. It's like a good referee. You don't realize a good referee is a good referee because you only see him when he needs to be, and you don't when he doesn't. So it's that same sort of motion. And so AEW is much the same as WWE in that regard, except we have far more creative, artistic freedom, or at least I do. Now that I work there, I don't feel any fear per se, other than from the internet, of course, which everybody has to worry about. But I don't feel that any fear of saying the wrong thing, or not getting to say the right thing. There are a lot of things that are very important that we get out in terms of storyline, etc., etc. But it's the best gig I've ever had, and I can never thank Tony Khan enough for the spot, etc., etc. It's just it's an absolute blessing. It really is.
Very nice. So, as your role as a commentator, have you thought about possibly, not now, but in the future, probably transitioning more to a producer role? Because I the way you've put your matches together in your career, I could see you just putting on just masterclass of performances with the guys in AEW. Have you thought about possibly transitioning to a producer role in the future?
I don't think so. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say that. I know that when I was in WWE, I oftentimes would go, I really feel like I could say something about this match. I could have said beforehand that I think really would have helped them. Every now and then, if some of the guys like Grayson Waller, every now and again, guys like that will come up and, knew my history and would ask me a couple of ideas, and I'd be able to give them a little bit of input, etc., etc. But now commentary takes up so much of my time in terms of the preparation on the show, etc., and especially when I'm still getting in the ring every week as well, with the possibility of wrestling again. Then I don't think there's the time for it. I think I'm probably more valuable as the commentator in that regard. And also an agent, producer, whatever you want to call it. It's a very, very difficult job. Very difficult job. There's a lot of, I don't want to say egos involved, but there are egos involved. And there's also, you've got two people, if it's a singles match, or four people, or however many people who are in this match, who all have their own idea of what they want to do with the match. Then you've got, the agent above that. Then you've got Tony. Everybody's got a different idea necessarily of what this wants to go, and you've got to somehow navigate all of this. And it's not not for me. I don't think so. No.
I got it. I respect that.
Mm.
So, I think we're gonna kind of just get this wrapped up here in just a few minutes. We have any more questions on the super chat?
No, but I had a couple of questions.
Go right ahead, my brother.
When you now when you look back at everything that you've done, what points like stick out in your mind as things that you'll always remember?
Yeah, of course. There's got to be a few, and it's not always necessarily the big moments. I mean, you mentioned Wembley, obviously, and times. I think the first pay-per-view Ring of Honor did, the match with Kurt Angle, things like that. I remember a match, TNA, I only did one international tour with. Did a match, me and Pope at Wembley Arena. And I remember that match getting over really well with the crowd and coming to the back and going, yeah. And there were little things I did in that match that I took from the whole journey. Robbie Brookside used to have a catchphrase, "We want more, we want more," and he'd get the fans to clap while he was doing that. And I managed to get that out there as well. So I took a little bit of that, and then there was something else I took from Les Thatcher, my original trainer, and then, just added things in, and I just felt comfortable. I mean, you fellas, I'm sure, can understand. You have those moments, it's called flow states, where you just go, yeah. You have the nerves before, but when you get out there, that nerve dissipates. You just feel, this is where I'm meant to be. This is what I was put on the earth to do. I know I can do this. And I remember having that match and coming to the back, and Samoa Joe was back there, who is kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of professional wrestling to me, in terms of how smart and respected he is as well. And as I walked back through the curtain, he just looked at me and he said, now you get it. That's it. That was it. And that to me was one of those moments that will still stand out. But there were just so many moments of hanging out with friends. And a lot of times, again, I'm sure you guys agree, right? It's stuff after the show. It's the friendships that you form, the experiences that you go through together.
Yes.
And I say this sometimes when I'm doing seminars to people. I remember the first dark match. I didn't do many, actually. Maybe the only dark match I did with WWE. It was for Heat, and it was against, I want to say, Doug Basham. It might have been Danny Basham. It was one of those guys anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I always do the handstand in the corner, and I wanted to do the spot where he goes, I go to shoot him, he reverses, I do the headstand, and then he drop kicks me in the face. And I thought, it's a good spot. It makes him look great,
Right.
But at the time, they were getting a lot of grief about giving the extras too much stuff, making them look too good. So even the idea that I'd get on top enough to whip him to then reverse was too much, And I remember being out there beforehand and hearing a guy in the front row go, "Who the fuck are you?" And I just remember smiling and thinking, I tell you who I am. I'm someone who had a dream. We didn't fucking say, no, it's too difficult. We didn't fucking give up. We moved to a different country. We spent shit tons of money, sacrificed a lot, and endured pain and injuries to have a fucking match, to then get to the stage that you're good enough that WWE asks you to come and put over one of their guys. That's who the fuck I am. And everybody who's got to that stage should feel that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it takes something. If you take 100 guys who put their money down to go to a wrestling school, I would guess maybe five get to have their first professional match. Of those 5 who have their first professional match, maybe 1 makes money. So you've got to extrapolate that back to 1,000 people, of maybe 1,000 people, only 1 makes money at it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's probably 10,000 people that actually make a good living. You know what I mean? And so you have to appreciate it, just the fact that you've achieved anything,
Absolutely.
Get up in the morning, get out of bed, and you try to make a step closer to making your dream come true and make the world a better place by proxy.
100%.
Makes sense. I like that. I guess one last thing. We don't want to keep you too far past
Well,
your.
I got the one question to ask everyone, so go right ahead.
The long-term feud with Bryan Danielson. When did you guys realize that you had that kind of chemistry, and what do you think has kept it going for so long?
Hatred and jealousy, certainly.
I like it.
On his part.
I knew that was gonna be the fucking answer. I knew that was gonna be the answer.
So I think, yeah, he's probably just, I've always been more handsome than him. He looks like a Neanderthal.
These are
And I think
facts.
most of his success comes from the fact that he's always felt insecure and inferior around me. Now we just we bicker a lot. We're very similar in many ways, different in different ways as well. So that I think makes that perfect chemistry in that regard. We had styles that meshed well in that regard. And yeah, I just think it's an intangible thing. You don't really know until you get in there with somebody. There's timing. There's people finding that sort of dynamic. There's always a power dynamic, and if you don't have the right power dynamic, you never work together. It's the same thing with Kurt Angle. I've always found that I work best with the guys that I've got this idea and this idea and this idea, and they go, okay, let's do this, and this, and then it works. And then it's that's the beauty of it. That's what this business is that arguably no other entertainment business is, because it's all, no other entertainment business do you have to meld these ideas and these egos and put it out there. And there's a live crowd, and you don't know whether that crowd's going to react that way. And it's different every different night. And there was just a moment in a Manhattan Center, I think it was, in New York. And the match was halfway through or right towards the end, and they were just coming up and they were just getting into it. And he bridges over and he does that silly cattle mutilation thing.
Mhm.
And I just remember thinking, that's it. Now we've got them. Now we've got them. That's the magic right there.
I love it. I love it. So I ask this question to everyone that comes on the show, whether you've been doing this 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, whatever. I'm always interested in this because I was asked this question one time, and to be honest, I didn't know how to answer it at the time because I was still mentally, I was still growing up, so to speak. If you could go back and have just a 5-minute conversation with you about to have your first match, what would be the advice that you would give yourself?
Don't sweat the bad stuff. Like, I know how easy that is to say, and how difficult it is to do. I am what is called a determinist, which basically means I don't believe in free will. And I believe that everything that happens is already predetermined from the moment you're born to the day you die. It's out of your control. Now, you have choices, but you think you can make a different choice. And you look back on your life, go, if I'd just done this, if I just lied to WWE about having an arm injury, I would have gone there and I could have had the same career as Bryan Danielson and I could have headlined WrestleMania, etc., etc. But I never could have gone back. If I'd gone back, I would have made the same decision because I would have had the same influences to do it.
Right.
So you couldn't possibly do anything differently. I don't know any other way of looking at the world without it being deterministic. And so that being the case, you've got to accept the bad stuff that happens as it was just going to happen. And I stressed so much about those sort of things. And not even in wrestling, outside of wrestling, relationships, trying to make relationships work. And when awful things happened and stuff like that, it's just, we bear these things on our soul and it drags us down. And I think I would have just told myself, there's going to be a lot of really shitty, rotten stuff that happens, but let it go. Exist in it, breathe through it, we all grow old, we all die. Our loved ones die as well. And you can't change that. It's Stoic philosophy, isn't it, really? You got to, well, those three things. You have to, dear God, give me the strength to accept the things I can't change, power to change the things that I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two, right?
Right.
And so I think that's what I would have told myself, is just to let it go and just to appreciate every every little moment, because you just, as I said, you're just not guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah, and I know that I remember the fuck ups way more than I remember the good matches. You know,
Mm,
it's
yeah,
it's I like that advice. I wish I could, put it more into existence myself. But yeah, I
yeah.
remember I could have done that. Why did this happen?
Hmm.
Way more than I remember the flawless matches.
Yeah.
Right, right, exactly. But you learn more from failure than
Hmm.
success. You don't learn anything from success. Every time you
Absolutely.
Correct.
fail, again, if you pay attention to it, you can learn, you can get better from it, right? And there are no failures. These things are all set up. They're all going to happen, and just got to look at it that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've kept you long enough. Do you want to? We
Tom?
got over 1,500 people watching. You got any last words, or you want to tell them how we get how they
Yeah, I
can
mean,
find
I'm
you on
all,
everything?
social media's at McGuinness Nigel, so you can find out information. I do magic shows every now and again, but then of course, All In Texas coming up this Saturday, July 12th. Some huge matches. It's going to be just incredible. One of the biggest shows in AEW history. John Moxley, Adam Page, Tony Storm, Mercedes Moné, Kenny Omega, and Kazuchika Okada for the unified title as well. It's going to be incredible, matches off the charts. We're doing things in AEW now where we've really got a crew and a talent that's just knocking it out of the park all the time. Guys like Will Ospreay, right? You talk about psychology, you talk about the way of putting matches together, and he's otherworldly in terms of how he just pulls you in, and he gets you to buy it and stuff like that. He's, in my opinion, perhaps the greatest big match wrestler in the world today, and such a coup for us to have him there in AEW. But I couldn't
Hmm.
be more proud of the company and what we're doing. We're going back to England in August, of course, for Forbidden Door. That's going to be huge as well. So I just appreciate everybody that supports AEW and professional wrestling, and it's great to have an alternative, and how important that is for the boys and everybody involved. I can speak for myself, were it not for AEW and Tony Khan. I'd be trying to get a job at Starbucks, and nothing wrong with a job at Starbucks at all. I applied twice before, and they rejected me both times. So I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, a lot coming up, and appreciate everybody that supports AEW.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, we want to thank Nigel for joining us this morning. I knew you just had Collision last night, so it's kind of an early morning on the West Coast for you. Yeah, so for Draven Grimes, I'm Dark Cores. We want to thank Nigel McGuinness for joining us. Thank you for watching Heel Shit. Why do we call it that? Bad guys do heel shit. Peace.